We're going to switch things up a little bit and we're going to start moving into chapter number 21. And in chapter number 21, the whole thing really is going to be talking about ecology, but specifically what we're going to do is we're going to look at kind of what an ecosystem is. If we go ahead and look at the picture here, okay, so you got a picture of an African safari, okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at that picture. Okay, you know that you have the tigers, you see the squirrels, you see the small animals, you see the grassland, you see a snake, owl, you've got the forest back behind, but of course we've got the air and so forth. Okay, an ecosystem is just going to be any system that's made up of organisms that interact with one another. But it's also going to be living and also the non-living factors that form this entire unit. So we can look at the water. You know that again, if this pond or this water goes ahead and dries up, that these animals are going to have to travel further. If they travel further, they might be going without food and water and might get a little bit skinnier and might get sick. You've got the owl that's going to be looking for the field mice, the snakes, things like that. You've got the lion or the tigers that are going to be going ahead and hunting some of these animals and so forth. You've got the trees in the background that are going to provide the shelter. You've got the air that they're going to be breathing, and of course we've got the different dirts and things like that. So I've included both living and some of the non-living things, but every single one of these things are going to be making up that ecosystem. So let's look at the word interaction. Okay, birds will land in the trees to build their nests, but will fly away when we get close to them. So again, they're kind of using that as shelter. You've got the grassland that the snakes are going to be hiding in. So again, there are different interactions that will take place. Heat will also provide things that go on with interactions, because you've got animals, when it's too hot, they don't want to expend that energy trying to chase another animal. So they might just kind of lay low in that grassland, or like I said with the heat, they might just kind of lay low and not let anything happen. But if it's cooler, that's when they're going to go ahead and go out and start doing some of their hunting. As we look at these interactions and study them, we can go ahead and we can classify this whole study as ecology. And ecology, anytime you see the word ology, it's a study of. But here we're going to be studying the interactions that take place among both those living and non-living things that I went ahead and talked about earlier. Ecologists will spend a lot of time outdoors. They'll be conducting experiments. They'll look at the water quality, they'll look at the trees, they'll look at how much or what the soil is like and stuff like that. The last one there I have down is, let's think about a deer population, game and parks commissions. Okay, if you're in Nebraska, and some of you I do know hunt deer, but let's say it's a year that not many deer are taken. So all of a sudden that next year you might find that a lot more fawns are born, they start to grow up, but now there's going to be more food that's going to be eaten. You might also find that as the deer start looking for that food might be a little bit less, that again some of these diseases take place. So what the Game and Parks is going to say is, or look at, is if there is a larger population of deer, they might go ahead and let you have an either or. Maybe with a tag you can go ahead and take 2 deer, 1 buck and 1 doe, and things like that. So how that hunting season takes place is also going to be kind of studying that population or that ecosystem that's going on with the deer and so forth. Ecosystems, they can be large ones, or there can also be small ones. Okay, so larger ecosystems and smaller ones. But the whole entire ecosystem that is on Earth is going to be called the biosphere. The biosphere is the part of the Earth where organisms can live. Basically, that's almost the whole Earth. We've got the sky and the atmosphere for birds and stuff like that. So it says here that this can include the Earth's crust, lakes, rivers, atmospheres, streams, ponds, things like that. So basically we're talking about really the whole entire Earth. The biosphere, though, we can go ahead and we can divide it into smaller ecosystems. Maybe we're going to look at the deserts. Maybe we're even going to break it down more than just deserts, and we'll look at the Sahara Desert versus the Mojave Desert. Maybe we go ahead and we look at the oceans, because again, you've got warmer oceans and you've got colder oceans. So we can go ahead and look at the different grasslands, plateaus, mountainous areas. So we can take that biosphere and we can go ahead and divide it into some of those smaller ecosystems. An ecosystem is going to be made up of both, as I've said earlier, the living and those non-living things that are part of that ecosystem. The living organisms that make up an ecosystem are going to be called the biotic factors. These might include your bald eagles, chickens, cows, deer, anything that is going to be living. The non-living things are going to be called abiotic factors. Okay, abiotic factors, these are going to be things like your air, soil, sand, etc. Think about a chocolate chip cookie and a sugar cookie. Both are labeled as cookies. But again, think about the different tastes. You've got the chocolatey taste. Maybe you got more of a buttery taste. A sugar cookie, you've got that sugar on top. So again, each one is going to be a little bit different from one another. And again, each of these is going to make that uniqueness of it. When we talk about a balanced system, so when we look at these ecosystems, again, there needs to be some balance between the living things and the non-living things. You can't have too much of this taken away and all of a sudden an overgrowth of this. But you can't have also that overgrowth because, again, if there's an overgrowth, there might be more vegetation eaten. Because we're from Nebraska and in a farming community, you might find out that if you have a pasture land, you know that you can't put too many cows in that pasture, okay? Because again, there has to be that balance, because too many cows, all of a sudden the grass starts being eaten, especially if it's a dry spring and summer. But so there is that balance of how many cows you can put on, because like I said, if you put on too many, more grass gets eaten, grass isn't able to grow, so all of a sudden your cows aren't growing to a good healthy size for when you're ready to sell them. But of course, you know that if we go ahead and put too few cows, we've got an overabundance of grass. So again, there has to be this good balance. If you got ponds out there, again, you can't let the pond dry up, so sometimes you have to have tanks out there filled with water. So again, creating this good balance between those living and non-living things. Another thing we can go ahead and talk about when we talk about the balance here, let's talk about now the farming of it. If you go ahead and talk about the farming of it, sometimes you're planting corn, sometimes you're planting soybeans. The soybeans are going to put more nitrogen into the dirt and things like that. So the next year you plant your corn, again, you got a good healthy crop of corn. But again, if there isn't enough nitrogen, that's why we go ahead and we put on the fertilizer when we're going to be planting those crops. So again, just kind of introducing you to ecosystems and the parts associated with an ecosystem.